Dr. Melvin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here, Tyson.
So we were chatting a little bit about HR, and I'm not really sure people have a real definition of what that even means, because sometimes you're dealing with law firms that are pretty small, and HR could be like the owner just occasionally checking in with an employee, and then you're talking about like some firms that like 100 people, and like so you're actually having an HR department. So what is HR?
It's a very good question. I think HR, a lot of times people think HR is just hiring and firing, right? Real general concepts, real general ideas on what HR is. But HR is more than that. I like to look at HR as the bridge between the employer and the employee, right? And more specifically, especially with my business and my company, InspireWorks HR Solutions, we look at it through a transformational leadership lens where we focus on, individualized consideration and intellectual stimulation and all these other aspects and concepts of elevating and supporting not only the business itself, but also the employee. More specifically, when you think about hiring and firing, there's a whole talent acquisition process that goes into that whole process. You're looking at finally identifying the individuals that are most beneficial to the organization, right? The fit for the organization. And then when you look at the fit, then you look at their skill set. And oftentimes people are looking at the skill set and they're like, oh, they don't meet what I'm looking for. What I like to tell people is that skills can be taught. It's the character of the person, their ability to be learned, to be flexible, to be able to adapt to challenges. All those nuanced characteristics that people oftentimes don't take into consideration, I think are more pivotal and impactful in the space of HR. But on a macro level, 30,000-foot view, HR is going to be your support in ethical compliance, your support in workforce compliance, OSHA compliance, the whole legalities of running a business, and then training, leadership development, and creating what I like to call a talent management process where you can take somebody from, say, a front desk person, secretary, whatever you want, administrative assistant, and they transition into, say, a paralegal. Then they say, you know what, I love law. I'm going to go to law school. And then the organization supports the individual as they progress in their career so that now you're not having that knowledge loss of an individual within the organization because you've created a pipeline for them to go from front level personnel all the way up to senior leadership.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do as a law firm owner is actually promote individuals within the firm.
I love that.
And we just had, they were all contingent on each other. I think it was 4 positions that all got promoted. And they were all contingent on each of them like accepting that, because we had to have like the person at the top had to move up, and then the person below that had to move up, and the person below that. So it all worked out. It was really interesting, and it was such a rewarding thing to see it go within the same. Like, it was just cool. It was the first time we'd had something that big, like a shift, and we've promoted several people, but in one big shift, it was cool. It was really cool to see.
That's beautiful. I mean, like really, what that is succession planning in its finest, right? You take each individual and you move them up, but you already had a plan for replacing the next person, right? Yep. So these individuals are already kind of shadowing, understanding what the next leadership role is, right? And then you just continue to build on those skills.
Well, what's cool is it's because we know that they all have the characteristics of what we're looking for in that person. Because I take the same approach where, like, okay, you give me the person that we want with the right energy and all that, right? We can put them in any role, and obviously if you're a lawyer, you gotta have a license. But
of course,
other than that, like I can put any of you in any role, and you're gonna fit nicely. So if you are an organization though, and you're trying to figure out like what the right culture is before you, so let's say you're a true solo. Right?
Yes,
you're a law firm owner, like you're the only person. But you're going to start to grow and add people. Like, how do you figure out what the culture needs to look like? Because that's not the easiest thing to do.
I often say that culture is dictated by your values. Your values are your foundation, and what you value as a leader, what you value within your organization, or what you're trying to establish within your organization will then dictate your culture. Building a culture is essentially how the individual will perceive the business itself, right? Because the culture is the determining factor for a lot, especially when you're looking at millennials and younger and age group wise. Millennials will take a pay cut Gen Zs will take a pay cut. Well, they won't even take it. They'll just leave to go to another organization that has a better cultural fit for them.
Yeah.
So establishing core values that are, flexible, adaptable, equitable, looking at, like you said, leadership development, those key values can then dictate the culture moving forward.
Sure. How do we manage the different generations, like Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z? You know what I mean? Like, how do we? Because you want to be able to be consistent, but the generations are different. Like,
they are.
So how do you balance that out?
Quite honestly, the only way to balance it out is by taking the time to learn about each generation. The boomer generation is very like, I'm going to grind until I'm ready to retire. I don't take vacations. I don't take sick days. They are the last, I would say, workhorse generation.
Right.
Gen Xers sort of adopted that kind of personality, very hard workers, very diligent. And they also understand that, I don't want to be stuck in a certain position for my entire career. Boomers were okay with that. They were okay with, hey, you know what? I'm middle management and that's what I am. And I will do this for 30 years and retire. Gen Xers are like, I would like to see elevation. I would like to be able to take it to the next level. Millennials, oftentimes their parents are maybe old Gen Xers or boomers. They are the first generation to understand the concept of, I'm going to work hard, but I need work-life balance.
Sure.
And that prioritizes anything else in front of, salary increases, et cetera. If I don't have a healthy work-life balance, if I don't get to take my 2 weeks vacation a year or whatever it may be, this place is not for me. And I have no issues transitioning. Millennials are the first generation to start seeing it was considered a faux pas if you worked more than 5 jobs in your career leading up to the millennial generation.
Completely.
Exactly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? You remember, right? So now millennials, oftentimes you start seeing transition every 2 to 3 years in careers. Most often because organizations aren't promoting from within, or they're not creating opportunities to promote from within. And they're not also effectively compensating the millennials as they continue to grow their skill sets and develop themselves and become more educated. Millennials are the most educated generation in 120 years.
Very true. Yeah.
And so then we have the new ones coming into the space, the Gen Zers, who, you gotta love them. They are very.
I love the grin on your face when you say that.
Yeah,
yes.
They're so unique because they're growing up in an economy and a society where just they feel hopeless. They don't see an upside to anything.
Well, they were born in like the 9/11 age, right? So like
exactly.
they're born after 9/11. So they see the war on terror, and so like it is an interesting generation to be in. Is there any other generation that you can think of that like in like recent history that is anything like that?
Anything like the Gen Z? Honestly, the only generation that has experience with war would be the boomers.
Right.
Their parents came from World War II.
Completely different wars, though.
Yeah, completely different wars, right? And the impacts of those wars were different than they are here. Iraqi freedom was a 20-year war.
Yeah, you still look at the death toll. I mean, look at the death toll. Like you compare like to World War II. Like we don't even know what that means. You know what I mean? It's not even equivalent.
It's not even equivalent. But the implications and impact on their freedoms because of that war has been detrimental to them too.
Sure.
Before 9/11, you could walk through an airport and have to go through TSA oftentimes, right? Now you have to take your shoes off, you got to take your belt off and everything else just to travel. That's the world they were birthed into. So oftentimes they become hopeless with the current status quo. So they began creating their own path, started going into streaming and, creating, their own content where they're like, okay, at least I can control this aspect, this small little granular aspect of my life. I can control this. And so in the workplace, that looks like, I didn't like the way my director looked at me today. I'm going to quit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
If you're managing a firm, like how do you address things like that so they don't get to that point?
With Gen Z, it really helps understanding how they receive compliments, how they receive constructive criticism,
Yeah.
how they receive direction and guidance. Because if you don't take the time to sit and speak with your employee to learn how they receive those things, you're going to come off as condescending. You're going to come off as argumentative or combative to them, right? So sitting down and speaking with them and say, hey, listen, you're a new hire. Congratulations. Welcome to the team. I would love to take a few minutes just to learn about who you are. How do you best receive direction and guidance? How best do you receive correction? How best do you receive praise? Because oftentimes, because they're a generation who was brought up on technology, they lack the more social skills that millennial generation and older have. I'm a millennial. I was birthed into technology. I was birthed outside of technology, and then I grew with technology.
That's what so I'm on the older end of millennials. So I feel like we are one of the greatest advantages of all the generations right now. Because we're in both worlds, right?
Yes.
So we can see the old world, we know the new world, and so we can dominate the older people and we can dominate the younger people because we know both of those.
Exactly. Yeah. And to your point, honestly, I think the millennial generation actually should be the ones leading the charge in how this country moves forward. But I
do agree.
We understand both sides. We are the bridge between the old and the new, as you said.
Well, speaking of bridge, so that reminds me. I want to go back to something you were talking about because having that bridge between employees and owners or managers is easy when you're bigger, but when you're smaller, it's not as easy.
Yeah.
So how do you develop some sort of bridge where the employee is comfortable enough coming to someone in the firm? So let's say a lot of small firms, let's say it's like 5 people or something like that. So you got maybe a couple paralegals, a receptionist, you got the attorney and an associate. So roughly 5 people. Like, how would you create some sort of bridge where people are comfortable to bring any issues that they have? Because that can be it's a cozy environment.
Yeah.
So it could be, if you've got an issue with somebody, it could be uncomfortable.
It could be. Yeah. It really could be. So it depends on the organization itself, right? If they actually invest in HR, which my personal opinion, every business needs to look at HR just as important as they would look at their finance, their accountant, something of that nature, because the HR is that intermediary, that objective bridge between the employee and the employer. However, if an organization doesn't really have the opportunity to afford or outsource an HR or bring HR in-house,
it's expensive.
It is. It can be. And there are ways that organizations and businesses are able to work around that concept. For example, our business is open to consortiums where multiple law firms or multiple businesses can collaboratively pay for the service
That's
itself.
a cool idea.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And it's innovative. And that's what we base our business on, is innovation in leadership through the lens of HR, right? And that consortium gives you the ability to, have access to HR for a certain amount of hours a month, and then they can help you navigate those interesting challenges. But if you can't do that, as a leader, you have to create the precedents. The organization begins and ends with you as the leader. And so you have to create the culture where people can feel comfortable coming to you, having that, that old open door policy ideology, right? Where the employer has the space and opportunity for any employee to come to them and express any issues or concerns. And as a leader, you have to be open and willing to take the constructive criticism that comes from your employees as well.
Right. So, and I know that there's not a one size fits all, but there's probably some do's and don'ts of whenever you're giving constructive criticism on something where maybe you've got an employee that's they're performing well in most areas, but there's a couple that they're struggling with. So how do you generally, what are some do's and don'ts on what you should do? And I know that each person might have a better way of receiving the feedback, but are there any general do's and don'ts of things you should do when you're trying to give people some feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. And it actually kind of goes back to understanding their personalities, doing a personality assessment, understanding how a person can receive information, because based on their personality, it will determine how you direct the conversation. For example, if a person is a dominant personality, a person who is very much driven, very much goal-oriented, those people you can kind of sit down and, hey, listen, you're doing a great job, fantastic work. Here are the areas that we can fix to improve and make you even better than what you are. Are you open to receive what I'm about to say? Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
If the person is more of a conscientious person, You have to be very mindful on how you approach the conversation. You have to approach it in a way that is very, again, detailed oriented, right? You did a fantastic job. Your metrics are outstanding, amazing. You've gotten 35% above your standard of metrics in this area. However, we're lacking here in this area. How can we improve your metrics for the next quarter?
Yeah.
Right. And again, even for going a step further back to the generational concept, boomers, they struggle with things that are emotional based.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're the ones who need to just give it to
Well,
me
even
straight.
as millennials, I think it's like we're definitely not as easy to deal with that as the Gen Zers. So
Exactly.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. Again, millennials, we're kind of in that space where we can take the direct, but also watch how you speak to me.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Don't talk to me that way.
Exactly.
I get it. I'll do what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I get. Yeah. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in Gen Zers, it's
They'll cry.
Honestly, if we're being honest,
thing,
they will definitely get in their feels, be emotional about how you approached it. And I can't believe he said that to me. I can't believe he spoke to me like that. So just being aware of their generation and also being aware of how their personality guides them. And then ultimately, the emotional intelligence of the individual.
So it's interesting, like whenever I'm thinking about the things you're talking about, talking about each person, I feel like, and we do have this in it's called Zoho People. So we do have it's somewhat like an HR system, but it's like a database of your employees where you're like tracking the things that we should be doing and not doing, like how they receive information, all that.
Yeah.
Is that essentially whether it's a spreadsheet or something, people need to sort of keep a database on their people to know what to do, what not to do with each individual? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Oh yeah, that's advantageous, especially if you're a person who likes to look at data like that.
Yeah.
If you're more of a people person, it'll kind of come naturally to you, right? It'll kind of flow. You'll be like, oh, I know I can't speak to
well,
this
as you grow,
person.
though, I mean, it's hard to kind of keep track of because you can't.
Oh, absolutely.
You can only give so many people so much of your time,
Exactly.
each week, and once you get into the teens and the 20s and 30s, it's hard to kind of really interact with each person to get to really know each person.
100%, and that's why HR is so important.
It really
that's
is,
their job.
Yeah,
that's what we do.
Yeah, we are lucky. We've got someone. Her name, her title is office administrator. It's not HR, but her role it really is. It's that bridge between the two.
I love that.
It's really nice because she's on our leadership team. Her name's Kristen. She's
nice,
but she interacts directly with the employees, but she'll be on the leadership team, so she gets to see both sides. And
so good.
And I think people are more open to talk to her about things than they probably would to me because I'm the boss, and that you don't always tell everything to the boss, but maybe if they tell to Kristen, she can kind of soften the blow a little bit.
Oh,
so,
yeah,
so I do think that helps. It's harder when you're at smaller levels to have someone like that because there's got to be that trust factor where if there's 5 people, they may not want to tell Kristen things because Kristen might be go telling the boss everything. That's not really what you want, right?
Exactly, right. Yeah. And so and I'm assuming Kristen does this, but she creates a safe space.
Sure.
Right. Letting them know that, hey, listen, what we discuss here is between us, right? However, if it impacts the business, if it impacts the company in any negative way, I have my duty to inform the leadership team, right?
Yeah.
But any issues that you may have with leadership, can be expressed directly to me. And then what's most important is the anonymity of the individual who's speaking it, their thoughts, their feelings, their ideas. Because if they don't have that anonymity feeling, they're going to feel like they're going to be targeted by leadership, right? So that's why it's so important for HR. And when we have these conversations, anytime we engage with an employer or an employee, we have an NDA in place. Anything we discuss here
interesting. Yeah.
is completely and utterly private. It is secure, safe and secure. The only thing is that if it impacts the company in any way, we have to tell.
So are you hiring for your company? Are you hiring HR kind of reps? I guess what do you call them?
So right now, we actually are just started. We started in March of this year.
Wow. Yeah. Congrats.
Oh,
nice.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you.
Very
I appreciate
good.
that.
Yeah.
It's been a really exciting ride. We've really been able to find our niche in that supporting, the community at large. We partner with UNLV and Nevada Partners, Workforce Connections, and a plethora of other businesses. And as of right now, myself and my business partner, Tiffany Ward, who's an amazing individual, top 40 under 40 herself, and she and I are the ones who manage the HR. As we continue to grow, we are actually working on our team becoming SHRM certified as well.
Yeah, what is that?
So SHRM is Society of Human Resource Management. And that certification gives you the ability to effectively run an HR organization or business, or being able to be the individual point of contact for a business and for HR.
Yeah. So the reason why I asked you about if you're hiring reps or whatever is like, what are you looking for as you start to scale your business? And let's say you represent several companies, you're not gonna be able to do it all by yourself. You and Tiffany, right? So like, what kind of people are you looking for when it comes to like an HR rep?
You know, I'm looking for a person who has the ability to be taught. He's flexible and adaptable, and beyond that, they have empathy and they understand equity. Those are the things that I typically look for, because everything else in the HR space I can teach you. Right. Tiffany can teach you. You have to have you have to be coachable at the end of the day, right? If I can't coach you, there's nothing that I can do for you or with you to help you grow in your pursuit of HR knowledge and skill sets and et cetera. So you have to be coachable. You have to understand that every person and every individual is literally a unique individual. Now, you'll start identifying patterns, but even those patterns have sub-patterns, and those sub-patterns have sub-patterns, right? And so that individual in and of themselves, and even the organization in and of itself, is unique because of the culture that's created. And our business wants to help you as the potential HR employee grow and become a successful HR rep.
I like it. I want to ask you more on the negative side. And this isn't about HR type employees. This is like employees in general.
Yeah.
Like, there's some traits like we've identified that are really toxic. Like, they're toxic traits. Like,
Absolutely.
So you've got someone that likes to tell you how hard they work. They tell you how many hours they work.
Of course.
How good they are at their job. They tend to not be rule followers, but insist on other people follow rules. Things like that. So once we start to kind of see these things pop up, we start to kind of pay more attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any other traits that, as an owner of a business, you should really be looking out for? Like, ooh, that's a red flag. Yeah. I mean, there's obvious things, like if they're talking a certain way or treating clients badly. But are there things that are a little bit less obvious?
I would say one thing that's a little less obvious is one person knowing all the office gossip.
Yeah, well, no gossip policy for sure.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Expand on that a little bit more.
That one person who knows all the office gossip is the person who is somehow, some way involved in all the gossip. Yeah. Whether they're the mouthpiece that spreads the information, or they're the individual actually involved in the gossip itself.
This is interesting. So, and because sometimes it may not seem like gossip, right?
Yeah.
But they seem to know a little bit of everything, I guess.
They do.
How would you? This is something that's tricky too. Like, what is gossip? Like, what would you consider that to be?
Man, gossip is so broad, right? And everybody's like, oh, it's just like, oh, so and so did this.
It's not just information. It's usually like the negative type, almost.
It really is. It's the negative information. It's, oh, I heard that we didn't do so well last quarter, and so they're looking at restructuring the finances for the next quarter. That's gossip, right? There's a difference between disseminating information in a meeting,
right,
and just talking about the negative amongst each other to sort of essentially bash leadership. Is what it ultimately boils down to.
How do you discern between like valuable information that maybe they're bringing to management because it's an actual issue, and then like in gossip?
That's a very good point. And it's a very fine line. Sometimes it's gray. And so as a leader, we kind of have to be able to dive deeper into the context of what's being expressed when an individual comes to say, hey, so-and-so is having issues and problems. Really, what issues and problems are they facing? Oh, well, their dog died last week, and then, their husband is thinking about leaving them. And okay, that's wonderful. Thank you for so much for coming back and telling me this. Not to say that's wonderful, but it's wonderful knowing that you're so open and willing to come to me and speak to me about this particular issue. my question to you is, if you work so closely with them, have you seen it impact their work? Oh, well, not really, but, I just want you to be aware, just in case something else transpires. Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate you informing me. Moving forward, I would love if you just kept those personal dealings and information to yourself and bring it to me when you actually notice it impacting the way they work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be sure that that person feels supported and elevated in their position. And I'm going to, touch base, because as a leader, I should be touching base with my employees to begin with. So whenever I'm doing a one-on-one with them, or if I have my director doing a one-on-one with them, I'm going to ask my director, hey, thank you for meeting with this individual more directly. Have you noticed any issues or challenges in their work? And then the director, who has a more direct pathway to them because they're that bridge between me and the employee. No, I haven't seen any impact. Now I'm keeping an eye on the person who came to me initially, because now you're stirring the pot.
So I want you to assess how we've handled it sometimes, because we do encourage people, like, listen, I even tell them, like, I have really thick skin, so even if you have something wrong with something I am doing, I want you to bring it to me. So if you have something that you've got with another coworker, like, we want to have this open environment where, like, you can talk about things that are frustrating you, things that are making you unhappy about someone else. Like, if that comes up, like, we want you to bring it up to that person. Like, is that a bad idea, a good idea? And I'm specifically talking about, like, having them go directly to the person that they're having an issue with.
That can be challenging.
Yeah.
The reason why it can be challenging is because that person may not be able to receive what's being said by somebody who they consider is their equal.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So what I would do in that position is if I know that two individuals are having a challenge, me as a leader, I'm going to each individual to understand each side of the story.
Okay.
And if I see that there is a challenge that needs to be addressed, now I'm bringing you two together. Now, if I have an HR, it's me, HR, those two individuals, because HR is the intermediator, basically the ombudsman of the conversation, right?
Yeah.
The non-partial. You as a leader, you're just learning to understand. So then you also have an ability to navigate future issues or challenges, right? HR is going to be the one who's going to help you mitigate those challenges that they can face. And then also now you'll have the opportunity to create an action plan, restorative action plan, a wrap, right? With those two individuals saying, hey, listen, I know you've had these challenges in the past. How can we fix it moving forward? How are you going to be able to receive this, and how are you going to be able to receive this, and how are you both going to be able to work together so then that these challenges don't arise again, or try to mitigate those challenges as best as possible?
I'm glad you said the part about bringing them together, because we do now. There are times where things do come up where, like, they don't feel comfortable approaching the other person, so that does happen. We just encourage it, but we do have the separate meeting, and then we do bring them together if they can't resolve it. And that was my worry, was that maybe us bringing them together was not a good idea, but we especially found that it solves any gossip issues, because
absolutely.
If you're in the same room with someone and you kind of if you went to the supervisor or the manager or the owner and you told them one thing, and maybe you went a little too far with what you said, maybe you massaged the truth a little bit. You're not going to say that in front of the person that you were talking about.
Of course not.
You're not. So that's why we've done that. And it kind of got to the point. It was because we were having a couple issues with a couple employees. We did notice it solved the gossip problem.
Oh, absolutely.
But my worry is that maybe it cuts the communication pipeline off, which I don't want to do either.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. No, the matter of fact, when you bring people together, it actually opens up the communication pipeline, especially when you have somebody in there who's being objective. Right? Your HR, your office administration person, she can help you navigate that space and, create that pipeline. And then when you're done, it's always gratitude. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate you both coming here and spending this time with us for us to better help navigate these challenges and issues. Do not hesitate to reach out and contact us. We are here to support you. We're here to elevate you so that you are able to effectively do your job. That's my job as your leader.
I noticed that every time you talk like you're in the HR role, your voice lowers, and you're saying you say thank you. You are showing gratitude. So is that like a technique? It's almost like you're intentionally lowering your voice, right? You're speaking a little bit more calmly. You're slowing the tone of your voice. Are Are you doing that on purpose, or is that just out of habit at this point?
Yeah, honestly, it's out of habit now.
Yeah.
But when I first started working in HR and doing leadership development and HR support, I learned that people are more receptive to tone when you are in a lower speech, very direct and deliberate in your speech, because it gives people the ability to process and understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very interesting that you caught that. Not many people actually are aware whenever I do that,
Right.
because my speaking voice is different than my HR voice, and that is intentional. Absolutely.
What are some mistakes you see either business owners or HR reps? So, and specifically when it comes to HR, so what are some mistakes you see them make? Because I've been in positions where management gets involved. So years ago, I worked for State Farm Insurance. I remember there was an internship we had, and there was 12 of us, and we got along just so well.
Oh,
and they
nice.
kind of got involved, and they did like these it was like they tried to make them like team building exercises, but it just did not execute it well. And it clearly created a division. Like it created like sects of people that did so these three people were kind of in a group now. You had this clique over here. It was really interesting to see how it divided people. It was near the end of the internship. It was just an interesting thing. So like obviously that was in the execution. They clearly made some mistakes there. Right?
Absolutely.
But are there some other things that you see where you're like, okay, don't do that. That may have worked, or people thought that worked decades ago, but we've learned that that's not the case. Are there anything like that?
Yeah. I would say that using HR is an intimidating factor.
Oh, that's a good one.
That is probably one of the biggest challenges that we face as an HR support company is that we don't want people to see us and be like, oh gosh, HR is here. We're in trouble now. When people see us, they're smiling. They're like, oh, hey, it's so good to see you all. Why? Because we created a culture of understanding. We created a culture of acceptance. We created a culture of equity. We created a culture of inclusion. And because of that, people aren't afraid when we walk through the door. Matter of fact, they come running to us. Hey, we got a question for you. Hey, we need help with this. What do you think about this? People will come to us for life issues because they feel so comfortable in knowing that we're not here to punish them. We're here to help them grow. We're here to help them feel safe. We're here to help protect them.
Yeah.
And so leaders who lean into that aspect of leadership development, HR support, are going to be more effective in managing and leading their organizations.
So how do you, and I'm going to use the word discipline, I know it's not the right word, but like if you had to discipline an employee other than like termination, and I know I'm intentionally using discipline knowing it's not the right word. So how do you take corrective actions? There's a word you used, and it sounded like it was almost like a PIP, like a
restorative action plan.
So is that what was the term you used?
A RAP.
RAP. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Restorative action plan. I'd never heard that before.
Yes.
Okay. So it's kind of like a PIP then, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I generally don't. I've not seen those work well, and I'm sure there's probably a way that you could do it that works really, really well.
Yes.
Like, what's the right way of doing it?
Yes.
Like, what's the sequence? What's that look like?
Absolutely. So typically, restorative action plan essentially leads. It's just coaching.
Okay.
That's what
I love that. I love the way that you put that. Okay, coaching. All right. Good. Nice.
So first and foremost, as a leader, you have to be able to identify, is this person coachable?
Yeah.
That's the very first step. Can I coach this person? If I can't coach this person,
how do you know?
How receptive they are to correction, how receptive they are to changes in their job.
What if they're not?
What if they're not? Then you as a leader, I often like to say, hire slow, fire fast.
Okay. So maybe a bad culture fit.
Yeah, it may not be a culture fit, right? And that's understandable. But through transformational leadership, I believe that even if it's not a good fit, maybe not, they might be a fit for somewhere else. So instead of just firing that person, reach out to their contact who you know and say, hey, this person isn't necessarily a good fit for my organization. They aren't able to receive direction and guidance. However, I know that I don't have the time to train them. I don't have the time to teach them. I don't have HR support, but you have HR support and you have the time to be able to help this person. So maybe you might want to look at their resume. Maybe they might be a fit, right?
Yeah.
So that's that warm handoff that transformational leadership typically likes to lean into. But if that's something that's not of your ilk, something that you're like, hey, I don't want to give a competition, essentially, a potentially good employee. You look at the individual, you give them an opportunity, say, listen, in this current instance, right now that we're facing a challenge where you're not performing to the best of your ability. I believe that you have the capability to do this role. What can I do to help support you in being more effective? Then we break out this restorative action plan where you identify.
Do you go straight into it? So do you, let me make up a scenario.
Okay.
So employee is, they are let's say that they are reassigning their tasks. Okay. So they get their tasks, they come in, they do a little bit with it, and they say, you know what, this is better. This person over here, let's say Tom. Tom's gonna have. I'm gonna assign this to Tom.
Okay.
It keeps coming up. So the first issue, you say, hey, that's more of your task. You keep that, but the employee keeps doing it, right? So at what point do you do the wrap? Do you go after you've given like one warning on it, or like? Give me a little more details about like how many chances you should give them on it, like all that. Yeah.
So it really is contingent on you as a leader.
Okay.
When you're looking at it, and I don't want to give some magical numbers like, oh, I gave them 3 chances.
Sure.
Because, maybe that person is trying to do better, and maybe you're actually progressively seeing, okay, they pawned it off of Tom every week. Now they're only pawning off of Tom every 3 weeks, right? So, but you're still pawning off on Tom. So why are you pawning it off on Tom? Even though you've done a lot better in, the time frame in which you pawn it off on him. What's the deeper challenge that we're facing on why you're not? Maybe they're like, I don't have that skill set. Tom actually is better at this than me. Okay, so how do I elevate you and give you the tools that you need to be effective in completing this task?
So let's say Bill is the employee that is, we're saying is not a great employee. I'm making up names. So Bill and then Tom's, Bill's assigned them to Tom. So maybe it actually wasn't something that Bill was doing wrong. Maybe there's a reason because of that. So you're getting that information because maybe Bill just didn't have the tools he needed to complete that task, which is he was required to give the. So you want to get that information first, right?
Exactly.
So you don't want to jump into that wrap first.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So once I understand that, okay, well, let's just say Bill's like, I just didn't want to do it. Okay, now Bill, I've told you multiple times now. This is the 3rd time I've had to have this conversation with you. Now this coachable moment. Now we're going to take it to a restorative action plan where we're going to take what we've discussed in our coaching sessions before, and we're going to make it more tangible by putting pen to paper, right? Where do you see yourself being able to improve and passing it off to Tom? Oh, well, actually, I need more time to be able to do it. Okay, so then, matter of fact, let's adjust your schedule so then you're able to fit this task in your schedule. That's part of your restorative action plan.
Okay.
So now you are not only giving him the ability to identify where his challenges are, but now he's taking ownership of that challenge because this is his restorative action plan. It's not your restorative action plan. This is Bill's restorative action plan. Exactly. Ownership and accountability is key.
What are the key elements of that wrap? So the ownership's one thing, right? So the action plan, the things that they need to do to fix it. Like what are there other elements that we have to make sure are in that thing? Is it time bound and all that?
Yep, okay. Exactly. Yeah. So you kind of want to align it kind of like how a SMART goal is.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
Essentially.
Specific, measurable, attainable.
Exactly.
Was R and then time bound.
There you go.
I can't remember what R is, but
specific.
Reasonable.
Yes. Reasonable
go.
And then time bound. Yeah. So you essentially want to build your wrap around a SMART goal. Right?
Okay.
And then if there's multiple ones, then they're going to have multiple goals that you have to achieve. And then ultimately at the end of the day, you do want to make sure that you're assessing and checking in periodically with that individual, because if you're trying to be an effective leader, you have to be sure that you're doing your role in supporting them in achieving that goal. So if you have a SMART goal, time bound, a quarter.
Yeah.
Okay, guess what? I'm checking in with you every 2 weeks, every month to see where you are with this goal. Now we have that built into our wrap. Also with the understanding that if I do not achieve this goal, we have to take it to the next step.
Okay, so that was what I want to get to. Like, so what happens if you don't? Like, do you set a consequence in that initial wrap, or
The consequences is understood and established when you're speaking with that person. Listen, this is essentially, I wouldn't call it a written warning, because that's kind of antiquated to the extent, but this is essentially your written warning, where now we're having this conversation where I have to be more diligent in ensuring that you're completing your job and your task. At the end of the quarter, if I see there has not been progress made, we're going to have a different conversation. Do you feel like you're a fit for this organization? Do you feel yourself growing with this organization?
So do you have that conversation at that wrap?
I would have the conversation at the end of the wrap, letting them know that's how this conversation will move moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're meeting with at the end of that conversation. So you're establishing the wrap, and then you're saying, listen, so then you get into the whole, to figure out make sure you're a good fit for this organization kind of a thing. And then, so if you get to the end of that wrap and they've not met that goal, right?
Yeah.
Are you sort of, because sometimes I see people, they will kind of make these warnings and then not execute on it. Right?
Exactly.
So if, let's say they don't meet, Bill doesn't, you get the rep, he doesn't meet the expectations. Should you take action, termination right then? Or what is the best course of action? Because what you don't want to show is we have these reps and they don't mean anything, right? But you also have to balance that with I like Bill, maybe he should go in another role. You know what I mean? Should you start to look for other places in the firm for him?
Yeah.
Or, what is the best course of action once you get into the end of the rap and Bill's not done what he's supposed to?
Absolutely. As a leader, you can go two different ways, right? You can say, okay, I see that Bill is not capable of this skill set. Do I transition him into another position and give him an opportunity to be more effective, but letting him know, hey, listen, this transition, you're going to have to go back on a 90-day probation.
Okay, because my word would be affect on other employees, and I'll be honest with you, my action I would terminate Bill is what I would do.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be open to other options. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I think many attorneys that we deal with are more of the take action.
Yes.
You terminate the employee. It's not going to be a good fit.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. And so, I do want to be open if there are other alternatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what effect does that have on other employees if they know that Bill's would they know that he's on a rap?
Exactly. Okay. And that's the key. If Bill is on a rap, your HR is responsible for ensuring that information is kept in-house as best as possible within the confines of the space that you had that conversation. It does not leak out into that space. Now, if people find out that Bill is on a rap, it's not HR who's talking about it.
It's Bill.
It's Bill.
Okay.
Now that's a different conversation. Bill, why are you going around telling people you're on a rap? That's confidential information. And matter of fact, you agree to keep it confidential in the conversation, because anytime we step into the space, there is an explicit understanding, especially in your employee handbook, that when you meet with HR, all conversation is confidential.
Yeah.
In nature. So if those parameters are established at the point of hire, then Bill is responsible and has to take accountability for his actions. Now, if you decide to make that transition and allow Bill to transition, which is oftentimes I do see organizations say, I don't want to get rid of them because they are a good worker. They just didn't have the skill set, and they actually may be better over here. That's understandable. Other lawyers, other organizations who are more about the action, DWYSSWYD. Do what you say what you do.
Could do that one more time. Say it again.
DWYSSWYD.
Because I've never heard that before. And what's it stand for?
Do what you say what you do.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
As a leader, we can only lead as effectively as our words are true.
True.
They have to ring true, no matter what we say. Now, granted, we are not perfect. We make errors. And our error should only be with regard to misstepping in a business acquisition or misstepping in, something that doesn't directly impact the employees. If it's something directly impact employees, if we say we're going to do this, then we have to do that.
Yeah.
Because if we break the trust of our employees, we lose their allegiance. We lose the ability to coach them. We lose the ability to lead them.
I think one of my resistances to a rap is that you hear the old adage, slow to hire, quick to fire.
Yes.
Right? I think you may have even said slow to hire, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily it flies in the face with that a little bit because a rep is going to be probably at least 30 days. I mean, so it doesn't really have that quick to fire part. And so how do you reconcile those two?
Yes. So that slow to hire, quick to fire is typically what I like to look at it is through the lens of that probationary period.
Okay.
Where we're trying to see if this person is a good fit for the organization, if they're a good cultural fit, if they are a good skill set fit. If they lack the skill sets, we can train them on those skill sets. That slow to hire, quick to fire, whether it be the 30-day, 90-day, 120-day, some organizations even go to a year in probation. That slow to hire, quick to fire is when I'm implementing that concept. If they're outside of their probationary period, we've already determined they're a good fit for the organization. They already have the skills that they need to be successful in their role. However, they're facing challenges.
Yeah.
So then that's when, as a leader, if you're more on the soft-hearted side, if you want to see your organization grow and you want to see that longevity of employees in your organization, which prevents that knowledge loss.
Totally. That's a big deal.
Exactly. Yeah. It really is. You might want to look into creating a restorative action, but you can make it more finite. You can give them 15 days.
Sure.
You don't have to give them an entire quarter. The time frame is up to you as a leader and HR and how you establish those parameters.
Yeah. I want to get into hiring in a second. I want to pivot in a moment, but I want to talk about firing in just a second, or for a second. Is other than like the legal part of firing, is there a right way or a wrong way? And be as specific as possible because we have like we're hybrid, so we have remote people all over the country, and we have in seat people, so like actually in the office, and we have multiple offices. So I sometimes struggle with the idea of if we have to terminate an employee, and I'm making it sound like we terminate people all the time. We don't, but if you have to as an employee or as a law firm owner sometimes. I struggle with the idea of calling an employee into the office to terminate them. You know what I mean? Like that seems so cruel. You know what I mean? If you know you're going to do it, it seems like such a cruel thing. So be specific. Like, how do you handle like remote employees that are all over the country? How would you handle like an in-person employee? Like time of day, time of week, like all that. Like what are some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to that?
Absolutely. When it comes to time of day, time of week, obviously the safest bet is Friday at 4 p.m., at the end of the day, at the end of the week, possibly even at the end of a pay period. So then you give that person their last check.
Yep.
And then
clean break.
Yep. Right? When it comes to the process itself, online versus in person, either process, you should always make sure that it's not just you by yourself.
That's great advice, yes.
You need to make sure that either your office admin, your HR, another co-founder or a director or their direct report, right? Their supervisor, somebody who is in the space to not only who understands the situation and the challenges, but also can be a second set of eyes if a person ever decides to bring some sort of EEOC challenge against you or file a lawsuit saying that, you discriminated against them or, sexually harassed them and that's why you let them go, right? Sure. So having somebody who can CYA, right?
Sure.
Essentially.
Yeah.
So with the in-person, it's never easy. It's never easy.
It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do.
It is.
I was talking to somebody yesterday about it. Like it's the minute right before you do it that is absolutely the hardest.
Oh, it is.
You're like, okay, maybe should I do that? You start to okay,
exactly.
No, I'm doing it, and then you're like walking over. It's just that all that minute right before is the worst.
Exactly, right? And you're sitting there, you're stewing. You're like, man, I'm about to devastatingly impact this person's life. Yeah. They're about to have no income. Maybe they have a family and now they have to go to look for a job. Like all these things are running through your mind. You're like, can I give them another chance? Like that often pops in your mind. Like, can I give them one more chance? But as leaders, we have to remember and understand that this person is an individual who has showed you time and time again that they're incapable of performing the jobs and duties of their role.
Completely.
And so because of that, you have to do what's best for the company at this point, and that's to protect it and to allow it to continue to grow so you have longevity.
Right.
Right. We have to remember that. It's not personal, it's business. And if we're able to frame that in our mind, saying that, I want this business to grow, I want it to be successful. And for me to be able to do that, I have to find somebody who is more effective in this role. That's how I continue to remind myself, yeah, it sucks. I'm sorry. But this is how we're going to move forward.
Right. And I struggle with the idea that like it's business, not personal. Not because I disagree with that. It's that because, and not that I'm too sappy about it. It's that your lives are so intertwined. As like you from a personal standpoint. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a law firm owner. Yeah. So like. And this comes from a buddy of mine, Jay Ruane. He's a lawyer in Connecticut, and he talks about how like look at a picture of your family before you go do it because like it helps you make that decision, right? Yeah. Like because that is impacting the family. You know what I mean? So there's the business, but there's also the personal part of it too.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we're human, right? We spend 40 plus hours a week at our job, right? Yeah. Quite oftentimes, we spend more time with our work family than we do with our own family. Right, especially if you're a person who's working a 9 to 5, right? If you don't own a business and you're working in somebody else's business or working in somebody else's government or private sector or public sector, whatever it may be. To that point, we also have to remember this individual is not a good fit. Period.
Right. Doesn't fit the culture.
It doesn't fit the culture. They don't fit the job description, which is your guiding star for that individual. They're not doing this. They're not doing this. They're not doing this. As you go look at their job description and you're checking off the things they're not doing, you're like, wow, out of 15 roles and responsibilities they have, they're not doing 9 of them.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem there is a lot of people don't have that stuff. They don't have the job. Like we use a job scorecard, and so it tells what the job, like the purpose of the job. Yeah. What qualities we're looking at, like what skills we need. It also has like these are the outcomes that we need from you, and then also the KPIs. Nice. So you have all those things, and we talk about that early in the interview process too, so people know. But big problem is like people don't know what that is.
Yeah,
they don't create a job description. Yeah, they have a job ad that they've used for 20 years.
Yes,
and it hasn't really changed much, and so they can't really go look at that.
Yeah. And that's actually scary. Because if you're using the same job description from 20 years ago.
Yeah. And I'm exaggerating a bit, but I probably not too much for a lot of people.
Yeah, probably not too much. Even if it's 5 years, that position has changed.
So it's funny because we've noticed that we were using, and listen, I'm just as guilty of a lot of this stuff as many other people, but we had been using the same job ad for a couple of years. And what we noticed was we had a huge fall off in number of people that were applying. We're like, what is going on? So we tweaked it. There was something about the other one that was not effective, and we tweaked it. We changed it, and they came back up. So it is interesting how like there's something how society changes. Like someone saw something in the other, or they saw something in that job ad just wasn't resonating like
exactly
it used to. Yeah,
absolutely, and that's what it is. It's the culture shift. It's the understanding of work through the workforce. Right, the workforce changes. And so their understanding of how work is supposed to be changes. And it changes every, 5 to 7 years, give or
easily.
take?
Yeah, maybe more than that.
Yeah. I mean, nowadays it's changing even quicker, right? But on average, it's usually, around 5 years, some say 3, But if you're being effective in ensuring that your job description or your job posting is up to date with the actual role, to your point, you're going to continue to see applicants apply.
Right.
And it's just something as minor as changing, the title, right? Still doing the same job, but the title change is something that may be an attention grabber for a potential employee.
Which is why it's like that clickbaity stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You are almost like marketing to talent. That's what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. And that's even more important today than it was 20 years ago.
Completely.
Right? You have to market to the talent because the talent are not proactive in understanding what the job itself is. They have to something has to get their attention first. It's like, oh, I like that. Okay, so what does this have to do? Oh, okay. Oh, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that.
Yeah.
So that's very important is making sure that when you're doing your job posting, update it every single time. Even if it was a year, update it, because you never know.
Yeah. So I want to shift gears to it's like the main reason why we wanted to have you on here, but we've had all these other great conversations. So
absolutely.
I want to talk about like DISC and like personality profiles and all that kind of stuff, because we use personality profiles in our firm, and it is helpful in some aspects. I think that sometimes they're not used properly by many people.
Absolutely.
They don't. Not all of them are the best. It sounds like. Do you prefer DISC or do you prefer?
Yeah.
Okay. What is it that these personality profiles, and is that what you'd call them, as personality profiles?
Yeah, okay. Personality profiles or personality assessments.
Yeah. What are some, before I get into like what really you can use them for, like what are some of the good ones?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, everybody's really familiar with in Myers-Briggs. People are familiar with colors, right? Those are the ones that are typically the most popular.
They're like the more basic.
More basic, and people, oh, I'm an FNTJ, Those are.
I think I might actually be an FNTJ.
Oh,
I
really?
gotta go back and look. I can't remember, but maybe I'm an ENTJ. I can't. It's been a decade and a half probably since I've done that, but I think I think that's very close to what mine is. But that's funny you said that. Yeah.
And it's just to work tangentially to that. 10 years ago, you is different than you now.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so important to be consistent in doing your profile assessments, because who you are, not just your personal life, but what your role is within your organization.
All right, so I agree with that, but there is an assessment out there that disagrees with that.
Interesting.
That they say that the first time you take it, and if you retake it, it doesn't matter. It's because you are kind of rethinking things or whatever. But the first time you take it, it's the way. So I agree more with you.
Yeah, I disagree with that, because you took the LSAT, right?
Yep.
If you took the LSAT the first time, you're like, crap, I didn't do so good. But you take the LSAT the second time, why? You're a different person now.
Yep.
Because you've had this experience before.
See,
right?
when I took it, so now you don't get penalized for taking it multiple times. When I took it, if you took it more than one time, you get penalized for it. So I took it one time. I took it once. It was one shot and but I get the point.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
I took the MCAT. I was going to go to medical school at one point in time. And I did better my second time taking it than I did my first time. And to your point, it's because I had the experience, the lived experience that shaped my perception of the test and shaped the way I focused and studied. And I did better the second time. So I disagree with that person, because your lived experiences dictate how you perceive the world and how you lead.
Yeah.
Who I am as a leader today is way different than who I was 10 years ago. And so that's why I think it's so important that you do. We use the DISC assessment simply because we find it to be the most effective tool, because it's so intricate and detailed. It looks at your work perspective and then your personal perspective, your work personality versus your personal personality, or your natural versus adapted space.
Okay.
And so with that DISC profile, it can help you determine, okay, like for example, I'm a DI, which means I'm really high, and so the
what
best
do
way
those mean? Like tell me what the letters mean.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you look at DISC, it's a pie, right? Broken into 4 quadrants. D is dominant, I is influence,
Okay.
S is steady, C is conscientious,
Okay.
right? And so those 4 quadrants of personality look at how a person is perceived, being open or guarded, and how a person is open or receptive to coaching, etc. Right? So for me, for example, I'm a DI. I have a dominant and an influencing personality. So I'm very goal-oriented, strategic. I'm also very personable. That's who I am in my adapted state.
So are you? I mean, so those are kind of competing with each other in a way, like the different. No. Okay.
No. They're both in the same spectrum.
Yeah.
Because they're both individuals who are guarded to the extent where when somebody comes and approaches them, they are willing to sit and listen to what has to be said. However, they're also assessing and analyzing what a person is doing, right? For me, I actually lean a little bit more on the influence side than the dominant side.
Okay.
Because of my role of being HR, my role of being a leader in the community, et cetera, et cetera. So I have to be open and adaptive and engaging with the community. When I'm at home, my S is low when I'm out and about.
So it can evolve from day to day or hour to hour.
Yes. Okay. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. It's situational. Who you are is situational based on circumstances that you're facing.
Okay.
So for example, when you're at home, I'm an S. My S is a little bit higher than it is when I'm out and about. Why? Steady. I like stability in my house. I want to make sure that everybody's happy, everybody's safe, everybody feels secure. That's what an S personality is. Yeah. A C personality is an individual who is very analytical, very they can work very well in constructs. So like a finance person, or somebody who or a data analyst. They're typically going to be your high Cs. Why? Because they were working in constructs and confines. A person who's an S is a person who's very steady, who understands. They don't like the boat being rocked too much, right? Okay. They're also a really great people pleaser. They want to make sure everybody's included. They're like, we can do this, team. Well, let's do it together, right? Because they want everybody to feel included.
Right.
And then, as I mentioned before, your I is that politician who's out there talking to everybody, who can connect with everybody.
What about like a receptionist? Like, what would you want when it comes to like a receptionist?
Yes. You want your receptionist to ideally be an I, because you want them to be engaged. And then also, depending on what they do from their day-to-day, probably an S or a C.
Okay.
S typically because you want your receptionist to be able to keep an even keel, keep the day-to-day very standard, not causing too much deviation here and there. Or a C, possibly both, because they work well within the constructs of the organization. Listen, this is how you're going to do it. You have the step-by-step process on how you answer the phone, how you take notes from a potential client, right? So ideally, you want them to be engaging with the community because they want to be personal. You want to get that potential client's business, right? And then either an S or a C.
What are some ways that law firm owners and I guess business owners in general, like how should they be using DISC profiles? And I'm going to get into the next, my follow-up's going to be like, what are some ways to avoid using them that people are using them incorrectly?
Yeah.
And I'm pulling up other assessments. That's what I'm doing here to see if are there any others that you would recommend if you're not using DISC? There's like, I pulled, as you were talking, I was kind of pulling up, just there are so many.
There are.
And so I'm so suspicious of so many of them that I know that some people will listen to this and know, I need to use some sort of personality profile, right? But then they might go out and pick one garbage one. And so are there any others that you I wouldn't say recommend that you could say are like legitimate?
I would say that were legitimate. You have, like I said before, DISC. So if we exclude DISC, like the other one I mentioned, Colors is more of a surface level kind of DISC. And then also the Myers-Briggs is pretty popular as well. Those three are the ones that I've seen most often used.
What about there's like the Strength Finder is one.
Strength Finder is a good one.
Okay.
Strength Finder is more so about like motivators, like what that individual's strength is, and then how they effectively use their strength. So that maybe a motivators is a good one too.
Okay.
Which would be a good asset for an employer to use. And then also emotional intelligence, the EQ assessment.
And I want to get into emotional intelligence because that's I think that's an often overlooked thing that people don't talk enough about. I don't want to go yet into that though.
Okay.
Something we use Colby and we use Enneagram.
Okay.
We use kind of a combination of both and figure out like how best to utilize our people. But so thoughts on Colby?
Yeah, Colby is a good one, and Enneagram is a good one. At the end of the day, it's a tool, right? So how effective you are at using a hammer is contingent on your skill set in assessing the tool.
Sure.
Right. So understanding how the tool is effectively assessing your employees and then comparing it to your needs is what's most impactful. And it sounds like you're using the tools in a manner that will effectively assess your potential employee or your current employees. So that's good. At the end of the day, it's not an end all be all, right? I personally choose DISC because I like the way it breaks down personalities. I like because it approaches us from a holistic standpoint. It looks at the natural environment, how a person is when they're at home with their family and friends, and then the adapted environment, how that person is in their workspace.
Sure.
That's why I like DISC, because then it gives me a better understanding of the holistic approach of the individual.
Yeah. So does DISC, does it give you a score kind of like Colby does?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. It gives you a score in each of the categories.
Yeah. So what was interesting is we did a presentation in the Guild, which is our the paid part of Maximum Lawyer. It's a membership group. And
Nice.
What was interesting is I was looking at, it was about like getting the law firm owner out of like intake and signing up cases and all that. And part of it I looked at our employees that have been on our intake team and the ones that where we hired them and then they've been promoted to other parts in the firm.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to see like there was a common thread as to like what their numbers were, like some of the numbers, and I don't remember right now like what they were, but it was interesting to see though that the people that we called our cares team, so our intake, so the people on our cares team had a very similar. All the numbers were very close, like within like one or two, like it was very close. So it was interesting that we could now take those profiles, we can create profiles of people that work well, and then use those in hiring.
Yeah.
Now, we've not done that. Is that based on what you're telling me? I'm a little worried about doing that.
Using those particular numbers, those numbers are an indicator of a person's ability to effectively do the job, right? It's not an indicator of that person being a good fit for that position, right?
Okay.
So that person, let's just say those particular individuals, so you're starting to see a pattern. It's like, oh, okay, so every person who scored a 12 in this category, they typically tended to do well on the cares team, right? Now, do I want to take that and say, okay, I'm only going to be looking for people who score 12 or better? Not necessarily true, because a person may score an 8, but they're coachable and they can get to a 12.
Yeah.
Right.
See, that's why I asked. Colby's the one that says it can't change. And that's why I didn't want to tell you that before, but I think you're right. I mean, I don't have the science to back it up. I mean, I'm glad I've got a professional here that can kind of vouch for that. But I agree with you. I mean, there are like certain things you can do, you can improve on. Like there's like with Colby, like the quick start, or the fact finder. Like I do think that you can learn to move a little faster and jump into things a little faster. I think that you can also learn to take your time a little bit and dig a little into the facts a little bit more. So
absolutely,
yeah. But that it is interesting how like some people like there's the way, like this is the way. And yeah, absolutely. So, but you do believe that you can learn some of this stuff and you can adapt.
Absolutely, 100%. It's like learning a sport, right?
Okay.
Some people are more naturally gifted than others, right? So, for example, I'm a martial artist, right?
Which one?
I did Tungsudo, Shotokan, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh, I see. I do Jiu-Jitsu now. I had shoulder surgery, so I can't do it currently. So I'm off for 2 months. But yes, yeah. But
nice.
So I don't even know what those other ones are. Like, what were they?
Yeah. So Tungsudo is South Korean martial arts. It's been around for 500 plus years or so. Yeah. It's like Taekwondo.
Okay.
Yeah,
My wife she's a black belt.
Nice. Awesome. In Taekwondo.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So they're like, I would say they're like half brothers.
Okay.
In a sense.
Okay. They're both Korean.
Yeah,
right?
both Korean. Exactly. And the forms are very similar, very identical. And then Shotokan is a Japanese style of karate.
So don't mess with you is what you're saying. Yeah.
And let's just say that if I have to protect myself, I can.
You can. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There are typically women tend to be better martial artists.
Interesting. Okay.
Right? They're naturally better at martial arts. They're more flexible. Their technique is better. But men can learn that and actually then can surpass women because of their physical strength, right? I liken that to a person's ability to learn a job.
That's really good. I like that analogy. That's really good. I think it helps people kind of wrap their head around it too.
Yeah.
Just because you have an employee that might have a certain Kajabi score, DISC assessment score, then not Kajabi, Colby, not Kajabi, doesn't mean that they're kind of stuck in that spot. So that is interesting. So how do you think you can use these kinds of profiles to improve a team? So you've got your team. It's set up a certain way, and how can you use these scores to improve work performance?
Absolutely. That's a great question, because I think that, as I want to keep reiterating, these are tools. They are not the end all be all for any organization, right? Because you're going to have to take your skill set as a leader to help develop your team.
Yeah.
So say, for example, a person comes in and their score is low in being task oriented. You have to coach them on how to become more task oriented, especially if their job requires them to be task oriented, having to achieve a certain amount of metrics within a certain given time frame, right? So then you set them up for success by giving them the skills that they need to do so, that leadership development, that coaching to help them progress. So the tool can help you as a leader identify where their challenges are, and you change those challenges into opportunities for development.
Yeah. What would you say are some of the common elements or qualities of like an effective high performing team?
Yeah, a high performance work team has a HPWT is what they call it, is a team that has the ability. I'll give you a case scenario. A leader walks into the room on a Monday morning to meet with his team, meet with her team, meet with their team. They sit down, they say, okay, team, tell me what happened last week. They read off all the successes they faced, all the successes they had, and the challenges that they faced. They present that to the leader. The leader says, okay, these challenges can be addressed. We can look to possibly do this. How do y'all feel? I like that idea. Or actually, no, I was thinking this. Okay, great. These are our goals for this week. Here you go. The high performance work team has the ability to take any sort of duty or assignment, effectively disseminate the skills based on the team members, effectively work together, communicate when need be, and then be able to go back to the leader with the information that they need. That's a high performance work team with very little to no guidance from the leader, except for checking in and troubleshooting or assisting them with managing challenges they may face.
Can you use the DISC profiles and the other personality profiles to help create that sort of a team, or is it unrelated?
Yeah, you can actually, because what you do is you use your DISC profile to augment the skills that exist within the organization or within your team. So, for example, if you are looking to create a high-performance work team, you have a dominant personality. So you know that person is going to be driving the team forward. It's like, hey, team, we got to get this done. I know that Sarah over here is great at numbers. So, Sarah, you're going to do the analysis on this particular situation. I know that Charlie, he's really good at bringing people into the business. So Charlie's going to go out, he's going to go talk to people, right? And then you have the person who's a steady person who's going to be the person who fills in the ancillary skills, and they also support the team, because that steady person is the team cheerleader. They're going to be like, yes, we can do it. We can do it. And also they're the person who will keep it steady. Hey, Sarah's having challenges. What are you going to do about it? Right? Using your DISC profile can help you identify the strengths of your team, and then you emphasize and augment, highlight those strengths, and use those strengths to support each other to create that high performance work team.
How necessary is, I'm just going to stick with DISC instead of saying, generally personality profiles, but how necessary is DISC in creating those high performance work teams?
Man, I would say that it's a foundation.
Yeah.
Because when you understand who your team members are, you can then be more effective as a leader.
So, and it's an objective way of assessing it, as opposed to like, and you can kind of, instead of just guessing about people, you can, so you could do it without DISC, but it's just more challenging.
It's more challenging. It'll take you more time as a leader, especially if you're not a person. Some leaders aren't intuitive. They're not able to understand a person's characteristics, understand a person's strengths and weaknesses, right? Some leaders are just really good at being generative and strategic and have the ability to create opportunity, but also don't have the skill set of understanding a person, right? There are leaders out there today who, I'll use Elon Musk for an example, able to create multi-billion, trillion-dollar businesses, not too good with people.
Sure.
Right? He would be a person who I would say would most benefit from understanding and using a DISC profile so he can understand his team, so he can take that multi-billion-dollar business and turn it to a multi-trillion-dollar business.
Let me give you pushback on that.
Yeah.
Here's what maybe he has, and I have zero idea, but maybe he has in that he has hired the right people below him that can do all of that for him.
Quite possibly.
Because I do wonder about like a person like Elon Musk. It's funny you say Elon Musk because I often wonder like, how is he able to do all of this different stuff and have all these? He must have like these amazing people underneath him.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
So I wonder if this is like something where he did figure that part out. He's just not great at communicating.
And quite possibly, but being a good leader is you have to be an effective communicator too. Yeah. Right. And so that may be one of his downfalls, his shortcomings, where he can change that challenge into an opportunity.
Yeah. I often would I think about wanting to talk to his employees to see like if they love it there or not. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would love to know. And I'm not talking about Twitter or X because that's a different situation. Where
exactly.
But I'm more talking about like the ones like he built, from the ground up or almost from the ground up. Where like what. Because it seems like, they're really well-run companies. Yeah. So I do wonder, like, do they love it there, or are they just really high-paid people, and they're miserable? I would love to know that.
I would love to too. I wonder how much, and for me, I wonder how much impact does his board have with regard to running the company.
Good point. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because oftentimes, the person who's the CEO may often only be a figurehead. Right?
Very
and then
true.
The one who actually runs the organization are the SVPs, the board members. And he just kind of comes in and says, oh, I want to do this. And they're like, oh, okay, we'll find a way to make that work.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's kind of like, so my wife, Amy, you met her. She's our COO. And like, she's the one like getting things done. Like she makes sure that the trains are running on time and all this. So it is important to have like that strong leadership team.
Absolutely.
Which is what I want to get into next, actually. Yes. So I'm glad you were talking about leadership because developing that is really, really important. So how can law firm owners make sure that they're developing leadership within the firm so that they do have that sort of succession, so that it can keep going, so that they've got the high performance work teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a leader in the law firm, you again, touching on the DISC, understanding who your employee is as an individual, right?
It's like your baseline. You got to have that.
Your baseline of understanding who that employee is. Also understanding what their goals are within the organization, right? Like, do you only want to be a junior partner? Do you have an aspiration to be a full partner, right? Okay, so you do have aspirations to be a full partner. Okay, so then let's create a pathway for you to become a full partner. And being explicit about that. I know, and let me not assume, but from TV shows and things of that nature, it seems that junior partners kind of don't know how they become a partner. Just all of a sudden they do something amazing and outstanding, and then the senior partners are like, okay, you can be a senior partner.
Very common. Yeah. I do think generally there's not a lot of thought. There are some firms that are specific, like I will say like some insurance defense firms, it seems like they sort of have their tracks that they've got to figure out. But for generally, I'd say you're spot on.
Yeah. So to your point, if you want to create a culture of success and longevity, if I were a senior partner, I would want to ensure that my junior partners who I see have the potential to be a senior partner know how I became one, and then know the pathway to become one.
Sure.
That is so important because you have to create a succession plan as the leader. If you're not creating a succession plan, your organization potentially could fail.
Yeah.
As a leader, that's one of your goals. You have to be looking at the future and the present at the same time.
No, that's a really good point. You had me thinking a little bit because I've always taken the position because I had a partnership that lasted like 18 months, right? So like,
oh, wow.
It was funny. It was just interesting because we had before that, I had a successful firm. Together, he and I had a successful firm. We split. We both had successful firms separately. So it's like, it's just an interesting thing. But like, there is, I guess, at some point, I'm going to have some sort of succession. And it is interesting for me that I've kind of taken the approach that I don't want anybody to have a partner. But it's funny. I had not really thought about that part. And I know that succession is important, which I've thought about that a lot. But like more of like maybe selling the firm as opposed to like keeping the firm going forward. Yeah. When it comes to developing leaders that could actually potentially then take over the firm. So I'm not even saying I'm open to partnering with anyone, but or even taking on a junior partner. But I guess what does that then look like? And I want you to kind of think about, because the majority of the people that are probably going to listen to this are people that are similar to me, where they're the sole owner, or there's only a couple of them. And at some point they might hand it off to someone that's, below them, but they may not take on partners. Yeah. So how do you develop those leaders below you that you hope will take over the firm sometime, but maybe not for several years?
Yeah. So to your point, the several years is exactly what you'll need. Yeah. You'll need that space and opportunity to train them on how you effectively ran the organization, how you created the organization, right? They need to understand the genesis of the organization first and foremost, right? And then from there, I'm a leader because I do this. I'm a leader because I do that. I'm a leader because I've effectively done this. For you to continue this moving forward, you're going to have to adapt these skills and then some, because you're going to have to drive the organization forward. And the skill sets that you'll need 25 years from now are going to look different than the skill sets that you have now. So being effective in staying on top of your leadership development, going to conferences, connecting with other lawyers who have larger businesses, larger firms rather, and knowing how they became successful gives you a better, well-rounded knowledge, base knowledge of how to effectively run the business once I move on.
I like that. I'm going to make a hard pivot because we are starting to run out of time. Which the idea is that we won't run into this in the future, because like we're fairly new into doing the long form, and so we have another one in a few minutes. So I'm going to make a hard pivot. Okay. Unfortunately, into emotional intelligence, because I want to talk about that. And I've often been a believer that is like when I look at judges, the most important part of a judge is the emotional intelligence. It's 100%. Not the intelligence. 100%. You can be a dumb judge, but have the emotional intelligence and do an amazing job. Absolutely. So talk about emotional intelligence. Like what does that even mean? Yes. How do you gauge it?
How do you gauge emotional intelligence? Well, they do have tools that help you gauge emotional intelligence.
No way, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a matter of fact, I just took an emotional intelligence because I assessed myself about every 6 months to a year just to see where I stand. And I took an emotional intelligence test and I scored a 99% on my emotional intelligence. So I'm very emotionally intelligent. Emotionally intelligent is understanding and being empathetic, having empathy, understanding what equity is, understanding what inclusion is, understanding that everybody's lived experiences are different. And I would like to even couple being a trauma-informed supervisor is also another piece to being emotionally intelligent, because if we're being honest, every single person has some sort of trauma they lived or have experienced, and understanding it and looking it through the lens of being trauma-informed, knowing that this person may be acting or responding like this because of some sort of personal trauma they've experienced in their past. For example, a person who is very keen on titles may have been a person who didn't receive acknowledgement and recognition for their successes when they were younger. And because of that, they see titles as a means of establishing their approval amongst their peers. Right. Sure. So that aspect of that is being trauma informed. Like that's a trauma for an individual, right? A person who, may have challenges in effectively communicating, right? Maybe they had an overbearing parent who didn't allow them to get a word in edgewise. And so now they don't have the ability to effectively communicate because they didn't have the opportunity to communicate when they were younger. Sure. Trauma informed, right?
So the way I kind of look at it is, and I want to come back to the trauma in a second too, but it's like, I'm going to oversimplify it, like kind of like being able to read the room. Yes. Being able to assess what's going on in the room and like, okay, there's someone that's upset over in that corner. So let's not maybe not celebrate over here. Kind of like, like really just understand like what's going on in the situation.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you a fairly blunt question about trauma.
Yeah.
Do you feel that it's kind of overused these days though with trauma? Like, because I feel like everyone talks about being trauma and triggered and all that. I do think that there's a big negative to that.
Yes. I definitely feel that, to your point, I would say that people are more aware of what trauma is.
Sure.
And so now they have the verbiage and language to express that. And so now we're seeing people saying, oh, I have trauma and this is my trauma. Because 30 years ago, it was taboo to talk about your challenges, to talk about the issues that you've experienced growing up. Because why? You need to suck it up and get your job done because you need to work this 9 to 5 to pay your bills and take care of your family.
Yeah, and I think that there is definitely legitimate trauma. So I want to make sure I'm very clear about that. There definitely is. And there are things that, like you're talking like the title and all like that. Yeah, you're right. My concern is that, and I think I'm kind of seeing this more lately, especially with social media, is like I see that they were traumatized.
Yes.
What's my trauma so that I can get the same attention that they're getting? You know what I mean? That's my concern. Because I feel like I'm seeing, sometimes I'm like, that traumatized you? Like sometimes I'll see something like that's what?
Yeah.
Wait, it's like it makes me kind of step back. Wait a second.
Yeah.
So I do worry about that a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I have a hypothesis that people say they're experiencing more trauma because they, first and foremost, they have the new language to understand it. Secondly, people are becoming more dissociated.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And because they're becoming more dissociated, they don't develop the social skills to understand when a person is being, sarcastic, or understand when they're being, condescending on the negative aspect, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, they've become less socially aware. And because they're less socially aware, now they're pivoting that into trauma.
Yeah. And then their emotional intelligence is plummeting.
And their emotional intelligence is plummeting because they don't have the social
That's
skills.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
When you watch Gen Z sitting at a table, and I hate to use this Gen Z, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're picking on them a lot today.
We're picking on them a lot today. But, they're the softest generation right now, if I'm being honest. And the only why I call them soft is because they lack the social skills that millennials and older generations were able to develop. We didn't have phones to text friends, right? And we went to our friend's house. We had to call their parents' house.
We had a phone on the wall that you had to go, yes.
Exactly. When you wanted to call, a girl or a boy at the house, and you had to talk to the parents for 2 to 5 minutes before you talk to the friend. Who is this?
Right? Who are you calling for?
Oh,
what's your name again?
Exactly, right?
Yeah. Where do you live?
Exactly, right? So they don't have those particular skill sets, and because they don't have it, it has unfortunately made them softer. And that softness now makes them feel like they're being victimized or being attacked, which creates this level of trauma.
Okay, we'll end on this. What's your advice to law firm owners to help them develop those hard skills to kind of adjust?
Yeah. I would say focusing on your emotional intelligence. That is probably the most paramount. The most successful leaders, and studies have shown, the most successful leaders are the ones who have the highest emotional intelligence. So knowing how to read the room, how to be an effective communicator, and then also learning to lead by example, DWIS, SWID.
I'm still not going to try to say that. Yes.
And on top of that, always be an active learner, always looking to learn about the new skills that are in leadership development. And last but not least, think about the future and the present at the same time. Succession planning is so important because you want to see your law firm continue to grow and be robust and thrive. Or succession plan also looks like, hey, in 20 years, I want to sell it. So what I'm going to do to ensure that whenever I get to that point, my business is as successful as it can be so I can maximize on the profit of the sale.
That's great advice. Dr. Melvin King, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tyson. Appreciate you.
Yep, absolutely.